Hey everybody, I'm going to do a little piece on derailments, separate the facts from the fiction and the speculation and the rumors and all the bad information that gets out every time that I post anything about a derailment, whether it's a video here on YouTube or photographs on Facebook or on Instagram. There are always people with opinions that are just that. They're just opinions. Very few people ever state any facts about derailments other than, hey, the train is no longer on the tracks. One of the things I always hear people say every time there's a derailment over the last, since I've had my channel, is it's PSR's fault, Precision Scheduled Railroading, and that is absolutely untrue. There's absolutely no evidence or no numbers to back up that claim. Not only are there no more derailments today than there have been in the past, there are significantly fewer. And I will say that, hey, they are running fewer trains because they're running longer trains. Fewer trains, fewer problems, fewer derailments. And I'm not going to get into other problems that a long train might cause, broken knuckles, whatnot. I'm not going to get into any of that. But it seems like there are more derailments today because we have social media. We have people like me. We have a derailment up there on the Tehachapi, and I run up there and cover it. And before social media, most people never heard about derailments. Most derailments don't happen in cities or along highways. Most of them happen out in the country somewhere, up in the hills. If you take the Tehachapi line, very little of it is actually visible from the freeway. And the places that are visible really aren't very prone to derailments. They happen, but it's just not something that is the norm. So people didn't see that kind of stuff unless someone just happened to have a connection, someone in the news happened to have a connection, or if the derailment caused significant damage, or the ones where trains fell into rivers and whatnot. The news isn't going to hear about them. They still don't, even today. When we had the big derailment up at Tehachapi in January of 2023, I posted stuff on Facebook. I posted the video you all saw. That was one where the train was down the side of the mountain. And it was like 3 or 4 days later, one of the local news agencies contacted me and asked if they could use my pictures to do this derailment and if I had anything to say about it. I said they could use my pictures, but I had no comment. I don't work for the railroad. And another thing that you might consider when we go through these stats is that all derailments are reported to the FRA. The railroads don't try to cover anything up. That just doesn't happen. Maybe in the past, but not while I was working there and all the derailments I covered. And the reason for that is if they were to try to cover something up and the FRA did find out about it, that would be a very, very bad time for a railroad. They could get in just the problems that would cause financially. It would be a disaster for the railroad. Better to just report it. So whenever, even in switching operations in a yard, if a car goes on the ground, they tell somebody about that. If there's no damage or anything, you report to the FRA, they don't come out and look at stuff like that. That's not a big deal. But at a big derailment, they're going to get involved. And better to just let them know about it. So these stats, these numbers cover all derailments. And I couldn't find anything that broke them down into road derailments and switching derailments. I couldn't find any of that. And so back to Precision Scheduled Railroading. Every railroad had their different name for it, I guess. BNSF, Burlington Northern Santa Fe, said that they didn't even have a PSR program. They'd been doing it for a long time. Union Pacific called theirs the United 2020 Plan, and they initiated that in 2016, and the first thing they did was cut 1,500 management jobs. And so that, for the people that say that the big bosses weren't affected by this, oh yes they were. And by the time it was done, I believe there were 2,500 management positions that were eliminated either through attrition or outright cut. And a lot of those people, many of those people weren't ground guys or engineers, they were just people who were hired in management. They had no job to go back to. They had no agreement job. They were just out of a job. And I think that was a good thing. When I went to work for Union Pacific, their phone book was literally an inch thick. And it had, I couldn't believe all the assistant to the assistant to the assistant kind of jobs that were there. Almost all of those jobs ended up being cut. But PSR did not increase the frequency or severity of derailments. One of the things people say is, oh, that train weighed too much, or that axle, like the East Palestine thing, the axle broke because the train was too heavy. That car doesn't know, that axle only knows how much weight it is supporting. It has no clue, if axles could think. It would have no clue how heavy that train was. It only knows how much weight it's supporting. It's like if you were in a chain of 10 people with someone piggyback on your shoulders, you don't know how much the people in front of you or behind you are carrying. All you know is how much you're carrying. Same with the journals on cars. They don't get any hotter if the train's half a mile long or a mile and a half long. It doesn't make any difference. A journal is a journal. A bearing is a bearing. It's going to get hot and fail, or it's not. It doesn't make any difference how long a train is. It doesn't make any difference how heavy the entire train is. Only that particular journal is going to be affected by that. So it's another thing I always hear people, but I have heard people say, especially with the East Palestine thing, is it Palestine or Palestine? I think it's Palestine. I don't know. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm talking about. Railroading is safer today than it has ever been. Most comments that I get about this kind of stuff are on the Facebook pages. I'm on a few railroad Facebook pages, and that is where I get the most comments about this. I do get comments from you folks on YouTube here too, but I would say that most of the argumentative comments are on Facebook. When I just share the photographs. And I share these videos on Facebook pages, Facebook groups that allow it, and I get a lot of comments on those. And almost every time that I do, no matter whether it's a major or minor derailment, someone invariably says, "What's that, one a week now?" And they sure have a lot of derailments up there. No, they don't. They really don't. It seems like it, again, because of social media. They average about 10,000 trains a year over the Tehachapi Pass. The average per day is between 30 and 35. And from January of 2022, which is the derailment at Cable that I covered, from December 31st, 2024, which is the last derailment I covered, there were 7 derailments on the Tehachapi. And that's a pretty good average for 10,000 trains a year over a territory like that. With all the curves and the grade, it's a 2.5% grade from Caliente to Tehachapi. And in that's about 25 miles. And in that 25 miles, there are 42 curves that, there are more than that, but those are curves that could possibly have a string line done on them or a buckle up or whatever. There are 7 180-degree curves and 1 360-degree curve, the loop. So I know that it's easy to jump on the bandwagon. I wasn't a big fan of PSR. I made a video about it. But as it turns out, I don't know, things are going pretty good with the railroads. They're not having, I said, they don't have any more derailments than they ever were. And I always hate seeing anything happen that costs jobs, but it's the price of progress, and it's nothing new. I also hear the argument that if train crews are still what they were back in the good old days, we had 3 people on the head end and 2 people in cabooses, there would be fewer problems. And that's just not true. None of the derailments I ever worked, at least that I can remember, would have been helped by having more people on the head end or people on the caboose. As a matter of fact, it might have just given an opportunity for the people on the caboose to be injured if the caboose went off the rails. And if you had more people on the head end and the head end went off, then there's another person who could be injured. So I don't know. There you go. depends on how you look at it, I guess. But with the advent of modern signaling, it's a very, very good system. And of course, if you're out on the branch line or somewhere where you don't have signals, that's not going to help you out. But wayside detectors and all that are much more effective than people on a caboose who might not be paying attention. The detectors are always paying attention. And I'll put the link in the description below to the playlist of how things work in the signal department, and it goes over the wayside detectors. And again, PSR, and I'm not going to get into a whole thing about PSR. I have another video of that. You can go back and look at that about my opinions. Go to the my opinions on railroading, my thoughts on railroading playlist, and I talk about that. But these things certainly aren't unique to the railroad. Every industry is going through the same thing, especially right now. Aviation, the oil industry, everything. Everybody is losing jobs, and that's never a good thing. But, what can we do to stop that? The causes of derailments are manifold. Broken rails, bad switches, sun kinks. I have a piece that I did about why the railroad issues heat restrictions, and the last derailment that I worked on up in Early Mart was caused by a sun kink at the edge of a concrete bridge deck. Gets hot, rails pop out, and that train had guys on the head end, and they didn't see it. I don't know that a third person in the jump seat behind the conductor and engineer would have seen it either. But other gauge issues, wide gauge, roadbed problems where something has collapsed a little and needs to be tamped. Vandalism, grade crossing accidents, which we just saw in Pecos, Texas. Broken wheels, axles, hot boxes, signal malfunctions, malfunctioning helpers, distributed power units, which have caused a few of the derailments up here that I've covered over the last few years. Undesirable emergencies, which is what caused the last one. DPU went into emergency all on its own and caused that derailment. And poor train handling. And that's something I'm not going to get into. I am not a trainman. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a conductor. And I have ridden on the head ends of trains. It was part of my job, and I do not envy those guys their jobs. They don't go out and dig ditches and climb poles the way I did, but their jobs are while they may not be as physically demanding, they're no easier. And so I find it very difficult to comment on their place in these derailments unless the facts come out and the facts are that this happened or that happened. People, and that's another myth, they always blame it on the crew. No, they don't. I have been to derailments where by the time I got there, they had already determined the crew wasn't at fault. No one was disciplined. And that was the case with the derailment at Tunnel 2 recently. That by the time I got there, and I got there pretty quickly, and by the time I got there, I had spoken to someone, said, yeah, the crew's, this had nothing to do with the crew. So it isn't always the crew's fault, and they don't always get blamed for it. The railroads aren't out to fire people. That's not their intent. Union Pacific, and I imagine the rest of them are the same way, you're expected to do your job. And if you aren't doing it properly or whatever, the first thing they'll do is generally give you more training. If things keep happening, whatever, they will get rid of you. And I can only speak for the signal department. They fired very few people during my career in the signal department. But one time, I don't know, I was kind of questioned the validity of that, but the guy didn't fight it. The other one, the guy deserved to get fired. I have seen derailments that were caused by the signal department, directly caused by the signal department, not something that went wrong or a wire got together because a mouse ate it or something, but things that guys in the signal department did wrong and caused a problem. And I've also seen that where the track department had done things or not done things that caused a problem. So there's plenty of blame to go around. And I guess, again, it depends on what department you're in or what your point of view is as to what may or may not have been wrong or who may not have been at fault. Another thing, the PTC, positive train control, that is not a signal thing. It's a communication system that is tied into the signal system. They have to work together, which is why we had to upgrade to all LEDs and everything in our area, because the system that they were putting in for the PTC, the communication system, wasn't compatible with searchlight signals. It wouldn't work. So that's why we did all that upgrade. In my experience, PTC hasn't caused a derailment. If you've heard of one, let me know. We're a train. The thing is that if a train gets by a red signal, it doesn't go into emergency. It brings the train to a controlled stop. Emergency is bad. Trainmen have always told me you don't want to put a train in emergency if you see something going on, because you're liable to cause more problems than you'll alleviate. So that's PTC doesn't cause derailments. Now, I don't mind people voicing their opinions about railroading, whether the company does this or does that, or they ought to do this or they ought to do that, and they like this and they hate that. Those kinds of things are very subjective. You're entitled to your opinion, so voice it, because I'll certainly voice mine. I try not to be argumentative or confrontational, but I will voice my opinion, and I hope you do too. That's what's great about America. But yeah, when it comes to derailments, I prefer to deal in facts. So here are a few facts about derailments. These stats they cover all the railroads in America. There's no differentiation between short lines, class ones, switching, any of that stuff. And these records were last updated, as far as any I could find. The last time the FRA updated these records to the public was in December of 2022. All right. The highest year of derailments, according to this report, and it didn't say how far back it went. The first stat I could find was 1978, which was the highest year, and they had 9,400 reported derailments in 1978. By 1990, that number was down to 2,314. So in that time span, there was a 75% decrease in derailments. The last year that there were over 2,000 derailments was 2007, with 2,117. And 2022, there were only 1,259 derailments. I know it sounds like a lot, but when you consider just over the Tehachapi Pass, how many trains they run, nationwide short line switching, that is a lot of train moves. I would assume in the millions. So 1,259 derailments, that's not a bad stat. And only 950 did differentiate this. In 2022, there were only 952 derailments on Class 1 roads, and approximately 70% of those were minor, most in yards or industry switching. So those are the numbers. And I know there are people out there that are going to say, oh, that's the government, you can't trust them. They have no reason to alter these. The FRA I never liked dealing with them, but they always were pretty straight up and straight shooters. They had some really, in the signal department, they had some real dipsticks. I don't know how those guys got those jobs, and in some cases how those girls got those jobs. But in any case, they wrote up what was there to write up. They didn't make things up. They didn't take things off. They did what they did. Same thing with the, in my case, the California Public Utilities Commission. Now, I don't know that the PUC reports stuff like this. I didn't look and see. I just went to the FRA stuff. But anyway, I don't believe that there is or ever has been some kind of a conspiracy, or at least in modern railroading, to alter these facts. There's really no point in doing that. But anyhow, I've worked a lot of derailments over the years. I don't know how many. I have literally lost count. I took pictures at some of them. Others I just have pictures of. and don't know any of the facts about some of them. But anyway, I'm going to put together this little slideshow. It's just I don't know, 20, 25 pictures of derailments that I have worked and that I have seen photographs of over the years. And some of these, as I said, are pictures I took. Some of these pictures were taken before my grandparents were born. The point is that derailments are nothing new. This 1906 derailment on the Grand Canyon Railway was caused by a track structure problem. This 1912 Northern Pacific collision was the result of an inattentive crew. A broken wheel caused this Santa Fe wreck at Rowan on the Tehachapi Pass in 1915. This is the result of an SP string line at Cable on the Tehachapi in 1917. Incorrect train orders caused this 1921 collision near Dumont on the Tonopah and Tidewater Railroad. Crew negligence caused brakes to fail in this SP wreck at Banning in 1922. Speeding caused this one on SP's Donner Pass in 1932. This one was caused by misinterpreted train orders at Tortuga on the Southern Pacific in 1938. A crew ran a red signal in this 1956 collision at Galt, Ontario, Canada in 1956. This happened at Kismet, California on the Santa Fe when a hot journal failed in 1960. Bad track structure was to blame for this 1971 wreck on the Alaska Railway. This is the first derailment I ever worked. A rail broke under the Santa Fe train and caused this one at Cliff in July of 1984. A broken wheel caused this SP wreck just a few weeks later near Caliente up on the Tehachapi. Cleanup from an SP string line below Waylong on the Tehachapi is underway in 1988. This is from a Santa Fe string line at Bealville on the Tehachapi in 1992. A bad flange on a UP train climbed a switch point at Illman on the Tehachapi in 2002. UP string lined the horseshoe curve at Caliente here in 2004. A broken rail sent this BNSF over the edge near Cable in 2007. A sun kink scattered this UP train at Early Mart up the valley in 2016. A UP switching mishap at the UP at Famosa near Bakersfield in 2017. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was informative. I know it's going to rub some people the wrong way. Some people aren't going to want to believe this, but that's not my fault. You can disagree with my opinions about railroading, but you can't argue with the facts. And if you're one of those people that likes to argue with the facts, sorry, that's on you. So, again, I'm not trying to rub people the wrong way. I'm not trying to be argumentative or confrontational, but I just thought I'd put this stuff out there. All right, here are the URLs, or here, wherever I end up putting them, to my PayPal and my Patreon. If you can help the channel out that way, I'd sure appreciate it. Keep shooting me the ideas. Drop in the comments below or shoot me an email at motorpoet59@gmail.com. Like, share, subscribe, click on the bell if you want to be notified of future content, and we'll see you all later.